The Trails, or for weebs in the Japanese, Kiseki, games are, alongside the Ys series, Falcom's flagship series. I first got into these games about 11 years ago with Trails of Cold Steel on PlayStation Vita, and while I can't claim to have played all of the recent releases, I have played all of the Cold Steel and Trails of the Sky games, and I am a huge fan of the series and its interconnected universe and lore. Normally, I'm of the solid opinion that the industry wastes way too much time and money on remakes and remasters, but Trails in the Sky, along with its 2 sequels, are among the few games where I break from that opinion. Trails in the Sky, while amazing in its original PC and PSP form, was a 2D game at its core. This 2025 remake for Switch, Switch 2, PlayStation 5, and PC, on the other hand, is a fully 3D game, like the 4 Cold Steel games were. I had zero problem with the 2D chibi sprites in the original version, but I'd be lying if I said that the new 3D models and world weren't a lot more immersive to me. The Trails games are generally broken up into arcs based on where each game takes place. The 4 Cold Steel games, for example, are called the Erebonia arc, because they take place in the Erebonian Empire. Trails in the Sky, on the other hand, is the first of the 3 games that make up the Liberal arc, because they take place in the Kingdom of Liberal. The 2 protagonists here are Estelle Bright, the daughter of famed bracer Cassius Bright, and Estelle's adopted brother, Joshua. Joshua's past is kept a mystery for the entire game, with only enough vague hints to make the player more and more curious as the game goes on. And when his past is finally revealed at the very end of the game, it sets up a major cliffhanger that will leave you itching for the next remake, or immediately going straight to Steam and playing the original version of Trails in the Sky 2nd Chapter. I wouldn't say that they're my favorite characters in the larger Trails series, but Estelle is definitely in my top 5. She's ditzy, but also dedicated to her goals and her loved ones, and she shatters gender stereotypes with her bow staff left, right, and center. A lot of people complain, and not without justification, that gaming doesn't have enough strong female protagonists who aren't reduced to objectification. Those people need to play Trails in the Sky, because I think Estelle is exactly the kind of female protagonist we need in gaming. The most interesting change that this remake brings is a revamp to the combat system. You can press a button on the field to have combat work like Cold Steel, with a classic turn-based setup, but it defaults to an action RPG-style real-time combat. I'm thrilled that they added this real-time option, since action RPGs are in vogue these days, but that said, I always switched it to the turn-based, because I'm a turn-based purist at heart with RPGs when I have the option. From what I've read, this hybrid system was actually introduced in Tales Through Daybreak, but since I shamefully have had that sitting unplayed on my shelf since it came out, this is my first time experiencing it. Another welcome change involves orbments, the game's version of magic. The core system and mechanics are pretty much the same as the original, but they're tweaked just slightly enough to make it more user-friendly, and it's been cleaned up a bit to look better. The remake also includes a number of quality of life improvements, such as an option to play in fast forward, basically tripling the speed, to make grinding and traversal a lot less tedious, the option to fast travel to discovered locations, and a much more user-friendly map with quest markers. The game, unfortunately, can feel a bit samey with a lot of the side quests, especially in the early game, with a lot of them being fairly generic fetch quests and exterminate this monster that's really just a stronger version of regular monsters quests. Personally, I don't mind those, but they are understandably tedious for a lot of players. The latter part of the game can also feel a bit repetitious by encounters not being much harder per se, but rather often just throwing a large number of enemies at you instead of more challenging enemies as the game progresses, and some of the mechanics can feel kind of repetitive at the end. It's also rather predictable in a lot of ways. You know each chapter is going to consist of meet some new NPCs, discover the big problem in this town, find clues about big problem, solve big problem, move on to next town, and repeat several times. Again, that didn't bother me, because getting to know the world and the characters is really a lot of what drew me. But I do understand why some people took issue with the relatively rinse and repeat approach that each chapter took. All in all, I am extremely satisfied with the remake of Trails in the Sky. It's not a perfect game, it's got some flaws here and there, but it is dramatically improved on a lot of things compared to the original release. And these new 3D visuals look amazing. The combat system feels significantly more polished, really even compared to Cold Steel. And it's finally accessible to console players, with the previous release having been locked to PSP and PC in the West. The Switch version is perfectly playable, but the Switch 2, PS5, and PC versions are buttery smooth, with virtually unbroken 60 FPS performance and higher native resolution than the original Switch can provide. Even in handheld, the Switch 2 version retains a 1080p resolution and nearly 60 FPS. The Switch 2 version, when docked, gives the players a couple of options to either drop the frame rate to 30 FPS, perfectly playable, in exchange for a 2160p resolution, or keeping it at 1080p with a locked 60 FPS. I personally always prioritize a higher frame rate over higher resolution, but it's definitely nice to see the option provided for those who would prefer a higher resolution at the cost of frame rate. If you like JRPGs, then you are virtually guaranteed to love Trails in the Sky. I didn't care for the story and characters quite as much as I did with Cold Steel, but it is still definitely not a game to miss, especially if you've never played any of the previous Trails games, because this is a perfect launching point for the series. My rating for Trails in the Sky First Chapter on Switch, Switch 2, PlayStation 5, and PC is an A.